Your sensors are correct. Do not adjust your heading. You've discovered the Omega Particle, streaming to the Alpha Quadrant and beyond. Here's your host, the anchorman of the Federation, the Doctor of Dilithium. This is Jonathan Wiegand.
Welcome to the Omega Particle Podcast. Like the man said, I am your gracious and humble host, Jonathan Wiegand, with half my brain tied behind my back just to make it fair, sitting behind the golden OPP microphone. Welcome to today's program as we continue our DS9 review series, and we're going to be climbing the Tower of Babel today. I think it's a funny joke, Luna. Luna the intern, everybody. If I know I have a lot of friends that come in my life and come and go, and they go, John, what's your work life like? You know, what's your day-to-day kind of 8 to 5 look like? And the intro to Babel, DS9, Season 1, Episode 4 or 5, whichever you're going off of for that one, that's what my life is like. Unfortunately, we have people pulling at me, pulled in all directions. It just seems nonstop sometimes. I'm not complaining. I love it. It is a passion of mine, and I'm lucky enough to work in a field that I am passionate about. So, but that's a little preview of what a couple days of my week usually look like. So I definitely have a heartfelt response and a heartfelt sympathy for Chief O'Brien, as I think we all should, you know, and a lot of people work tough jobs too. I'm not saying I'm not the only one. Before we get into the review, I do have something, and if maybe one of our brilliant listeners out there in the Alpha Quadrant can answer this for me, is what's going on with the repair schedule at DS9? I've watched DS9 maybe 3 or 4 times. I'm so confused by this. So ships come in, they get repaired, and then they leave. Is it for free? Because the Federation runs the station. You know, I know it's in with, like, collaboration with the Bajoran government, etc., but who's getting paid here? Is it for free? Because, like, we have this alien come up to Chief O'Brien. He's like, where is my ship? It's been in, space dock for 3 or 4 days. You said it was going to be repaired. What's going on? Except blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, if the dude's getting free service, he really can't complain if you think about it. I mean, it's free. And I think the Federation wouldn't accept any money. Maybe Bajor would. That's the only thing I can think of is Bajor collecting that revenue. But again, the accountant in me is coming out. So let's get into the actual episode. I will say this is more of a quote-unquote tradition episode for me. Across several Star Trek series, as we'll get into as we in the next couple minutes, you'll see is that this kind of episode always happens. You know, this kind of outbreak, and then the stakes rise, and that, it's solved. So Luna, without further ado, let's get into DS9's Babel. You roll that beautiful bean footage. Like I said at the beginning, just like a few seconds ago, this is kind of a tradition episode, and it follows the original series and TNG episodes, The Naked Time and The Naked Now. It's very similar plot structure to the earlier episodes I just mentioned, but it also takes place like at the relatively the same point in the first season run that those episodes took place in their respective series. I don't know. Maybe that's a reason why. Maybe it's just fodder. It's easier to do as you're introducing a new crew. I don't know. But this is the third time we've seen this happen. So who knows? Reading those, The Naked Now and The Naked Time. The Naked Now is a direct reference, of course, to The Naked Time in TNG in the original series. Or as I like to call it, the horny episode. Because that's the episode everyone just gets like super horned up and super awkward, and we barely know these characters, so it's kind of like a lot of goofy and overheated melodrama, and I don't know. It's just kind of, that's the episode that Data is fully functional in. It to me, it's just silly. It's not really a lot of stakes, and Babel kind of does the same thing while regaining everybody's dignity, which I think is good. It's just, it's not the best, I will say. It's definitely kind of one of those tradition filler episodes. And how does exactly that work on a space station as opposed to a starship? So going back in the review, I really don't, it's not a bad concept to me. In the episode, I'll have to admit, I was kind of dreading a little bit. I really couldn't stand the naked episodes, as they would say, or call them. The big reason for this is the cast was just humiliating themselves, and I didn't like that. But thank heavens and thank the Lord that due to the nature of this virus on DS9, the worst anyone has to suffer is this temporary indignity of speaking nonsense. And that's far less, embarrassing. And it happens multiple times through the episode. So just a quick recap. You have a character who seems perfectly fine, is having a normal conversation, and then suddenly, without warning or indication, they realize, hey, something's up, something's wrong, and the character will say something like, I have to get the moonlight permanent sideways. Some like babble like that. I will have a huge suggestion. Please watch this episode with the subtitles on, because then you can exactly hear what they say, and it just makes the episode 10 times better. I watched it once without and once with, and definitely with was a lot more, I guess, just funny and more whimsical. However, getting back to an episode recap, O'Brien is the very first one struck down, and while Babel's almost told entirely from the perspective of the people without the virus, it does a decent job of conveying the horrors of those first initial moments, when comprehension abandons the sick and they struggle to make themselves understood. And again, that makes sense. You don't want a sick bay of everyone kind of saying random things to each other, because that's not really a good episode. However, later on in the episode, we see the stakes are risen, the virus turns fatal, threatens Chief O'Brien's life, and it kind of adds this more ticking clock scenario to the people who haven't taken ill. Apparently it's through the food replicator, so eventually everyone's going to get it, but it's just a matter of time. So it's an understandable turn of the screw, as you would say. And it doesn't really hurt the episode exactly, but I'm not entirely convinced it's super necessary to put that kind of pressure on. Plot kind of already had an inherent countdown because everyone was going to catch the virus, like I said. So there's already this clear sense of urgency and danger without having to be like, okay, we're just going to start killing people off. And worse, the lethal element highlights a plot hole that might not otherwise have been accounted for, is that no one on the station asks for outside help. No one contacts Starfleet. No one goes to maybe a nearby planet or nothing. It's just blah. They're just kind of like, well, we're just going to take it on the chin and figure this out in-house. And I mean, sure, Kira eventually does contact someone on Bajor, and that's because she believes she found, the engineer of the virus in the first place. But she's not kind of appealing to any structured authority. She's not appealing to the Bajoran government. She's not appealing to even the Vedic Assembly. She's just going straight for, I think this guy created it. He's lying. Let's go after him. He should have an antidote. And I'm like, why not just ask for help? Especially from the Federation. They would have all the resources and then some, especially since they've seen this type of virus before multiple times. I don't know. That's a big plot hole, but it is what it is. And I will say that the show has done a great job of establishing geography and social climate of the location that the station is in, and setting up just how Deep Space Nine connects to Bajor. Again, the big plot hole, Sisko should have been able to ring up the home world and get a team of doctors on board without any worries, just to kind of help them in context, with the Federation's relationship with Bajor. I just think they could have been handled a lot of significant ways without changing the plot too much. And it speaks to the core issue of the episode, is that I assume that I think the writers are still writing the show as if it was on a spaceship. It's not the worst crime in the world, but I think it's kind of, they're getting more comfortable with the stationary aspect of a Deep Space Nine as time goes on. Because if you think about it, you have even Voyager, they're still on a ship, still alone in the Delta Quadrant. You still have the adventures they have there. There's no one really to connect to except putting out a distress beacon to a nearby entity or nearby government. So that's kind of how it's treated, unfortunately. And that's fine. They're just getting their sea legs, and eventually DS9 will become one of the most well-written pieces of sci-fi in all of media. But for now, just getting their sea legs a little bit, so we're going to not be super harsh on them. Another kind of downer on the episode I didn't like, and I did enjoy it. I don't want to be all poop. It was good, but I just think, and it just kind of hit me with this episode that I've never really noticed before, is that it's just how the crew and people treat Quark. I feel like he's been thrust into this untrustworthy and not all that bright rapscallion type of role. And I don't say there's anything wrong with having kind of this untrustworthy bastard, kind of in a little b, play a regular role in the show. I think that's fine, especially with the quote-unquote purity and morality of the Federation. I think it's fine to have offsetting person with beliefs and ideologies. That's good conflict. But I think right now it's just, we're in the 4th episode and everyone's just taking a giant you-know-what on Quark. So first off, his relationship with Odo makes total sense. They're old adversaries. There's a nice runner of kind of mutual respect, contempt in their conversations, a little banter, and kind of establishes them. And it's not really pure seething hatred, but it's just a little banter back and forth. They like it. They like the chase. They like the catch. But everyone else is constantly dismissing or accusing him of double dealing. To me, realistically, a lot of these people have just transferred onto the station. This is, again, if you count the first episode, Emissaries, the 2-parters, 1 episode, this is episode 4. And not a lot of time. Maybe, let's say a month. And then everyone's probably hasn't seen too much of Quark's trickery, hasn't seen too much of his actual dealings. They're getting used to the station, their duties, etc. I mean, how much time are they spending with the guy? How much time are they spending at the bar? That's what I'm saying. They kind of have this, I don't know if you want to call this specious view of him. Is that even a word, Luda? Is that they're kind of just he's a Ferengi, so he's a jerk, and he's going to be double dealing and stealing. So it's kind of specious, I guess. I don't even know if that's a word, but we'll get the interns to look into it. And I know the Ferengi have always had this problematic introduction and experience on Star Trek, especially with TNG. It was just, they were the original villains. I don't know if you guys knew that, over the Borg. And since they were the original villains, they've kind of always been cast in this negative light. And of course, DS9 changes that throughout, the 7 seasons. But if you look at how Trek, the standard practice for how they deal with different species, you have the Klingons that are very warlike, you have the Vulcans who are logical, you have Romulans who are logic but no morality and very smart, so you have to be careful, is that they kind of treat the show and the different cultures, should I say, with respect in some way. Ferengi, however, been routinely portrayed as just the greedy nitwits. And I will say, Armin Shimmerman's has done great work developing Quark, especially over the 7 seasons of DS9. And I love seeing in this infancy stage, in the first season or 2 of Quark, and it just seems like he's more of a victim of prejudice than he is an actual crook. So, I mean, in this episode, his replicators are broken, so he just goes to an abandoned room and use their replicator. I'm I would probably have done that too if I was a business owner. And even Odo even says to him, hey man, you could have just asked and we would have given it to you. So he's not some criminal mastermind right now in the show. Eventually, we can talk about that later, but I feel like they're kind of just settling into these tropes that are really easy to. If that makes any sense. I will, and Luna's talking in my ear right now. So yes, due to Quark's sneakiness, he did make the virus worse. And he used a crew level replicator to give and pass out all this, virus laden food. But I would argue with Luna, Odo would have given him access if he just asked. No one knew they were contaminated. He wasn't doing this on purpose. So it was more just like, eventually it would have happened regardless if Quark would have not used the crew level replicator or not. So I just think it wouldn't have mattered. I think it expedited the problem of the virus 100%. But yeah, it wouldn't have taken it all. And who would have thought that this would have been the stand where I take on Fergeni mistreatment? Who would have thought? Not me. But moving on to other kind of better parts of the episode that I really enjoyed. And, Babel does suffer a little bit from some predictability. I think that part continued to lay the foundation for a long-running series. We have this teamwork aspect. It's not surprising the station-wide crisis brings everyone together. But it's kind of nice to see everyone accepting their various roles with ease. And all of the actors and actresses just kind of melted into them. And it wasn't, resistant. It just flowed. And there was a nice flow here. I think you see Sisko, taking command with confidence. Kira proving herself, willing to go to any means and to any ends to achieve her goal. And we see Bashir being very clever, which is a big development from him being this sex fiend, obsessed with Jadzia puppy dog. So it was cool kind of seeing him develop, because I'm not going to spoil the rest of the seasons, but we'll see him develop more and more as the series goes on, which is super awesome. And ultimately kind of harking back to the beginning of this podcast episode. So I like the fact that no one revealed any deep burning secrets, like in the Naked Now, where they just talk about their love or their lust for one another. This kind of worked out for the best. Everyone kept their dignity and their clothes on. I would say the most unexpected aspect of this episode is the source of the Babel virus. I think I was not really expecting that, to be honest. I didn't really expect it to be connected to anything. I thought it would just be a random alien thing that got through the biofilter and it just happened to be there. But no, I think it was an interesting take by the writers to get away with some of that coincidental plotting. Like I said, one of the big issues with this episode is they write it for Starship. And that can be really easy when you're on a Starship, because you go different planets every week, you get different cultures every week, and something might have just happened to come through the biofilter. It's kind of like this built-in excuse of an episode. And DS9's not so lucky. So I feel like the writers were still trying to get away with the same coincidental plotting, at least for now. And I was pleasantly surprised. They didn't do that. They took a hard left. Then just a recap of the episode if you don't remember. So Kira discovers a device attached to one of the replicators, and Bashir quickly determines that this virus is creating food that has a sickness built in, and the device's presence isn't random either. It was placed on the station years and years ago by Bajoran descendants? No, that's not right. Bajoran freedom fighters, we'll say, who intended to sabotage the Cardassians. So it's kind of just sitting in there and waiting, and then something went wrong with the replicator that O'Brien was working on. You kind of see like this 90s lightning special effects, and that it activated this device, and that now spread this disease throughout the food. I think it was a bold thing to do as opposed to like a coincidental disease, but it doesn't really provide us with any new information. Like, we knew the Bajoran rebels got up to some crazy wild stuff during the occupation. That's great. That's good. And it makes perfect sense that DS9 was a prime target. However, Babel uses the connection to develop Kira a little bit, because it kind of shows that she's willing and thoroughly able to kind of do some badass stuff she basically just like kidnaps somebody when she thinks it's necessary. But it doesn't really go any deeper than that. It's just, okay, she's like, I can go kidnap the guy. Let's go get him. Let's go get Dr. Cermak. And so she goes and gets Dr. Cermak, and bless his heart, he's not really anything more than just a plot device with occasional emotions. And first, I have it written in my note, first he's outraged, then he's shocked, and then he finds a cure. So he's just kind of like ready to roll, not really having any kind of resonance with the audience or with the plot. I do like the idea that the writers use political strife as kind of a scapegoat, as opposed to being something random. But I also wish, when you go that route, that it digs up a little more into the past. It digs more into the Cardassian Bajoran relationships, and we'll eventually get that in future seasons. But this was a great opportunity to even lay a tiny bit of the foundation for the future. And they swung hard. It's like a pop fly. They hit the ball, but they just didn't finish out, and they didn't get on base. Still great. It still works. But it's not an episode that goes for the jugular. And given the nature of the main threat, I feel like the drama is largely impersonal. Odo, Quark, and Kira all get to shine in this episode, but a decent portion of the hour is just given over to the standard narratives. Sisko's worried about Jake. People are frustrated. The ball, it's like kind of, when's the hammer going to drop on this character? Another positives as we're going through the reviews here is that, Babel may use a conveniently able context to justify its story, but the episode still has some power, and it's still able to demonstrate how the world of DS9 can take these old, traditional plot ideas and make them new, make them potentially transformative in a bunch of different ways. So I feel like this is, yes, a tradition episode, but it also kind of pokes its head out of the little proverbial plot hole and say, hey, we're eventually going to get into really cool stuff that no one's ever done and take new looks on things that no one's ever done, but we're not quite there yet, but we will eventually. So I thought that's kind of I just imagine this groundhog, like, just eyes level with the ground looking out. That's my review of the episode. Let me know what you think. We're going to get into a little bit of some stray observations here, but overall, I would say I would rate the episode maybe 5 is like earth-shattering. Oh my gosh, it changed my perception of time and of sci-fi. That's what a 5 is. 1 is just, I can't even watch it, turn it off. I avoid it like the plague. I would say this is a steady 3. 3.5. 3.2. I'd say 3.2 simply because it's better than average. We see a little bit of the greatness poking through with the potential that the writers have, but it just didn't bring it home. But still good, and it's better than average. So 3.2. So let me know what your thoughts are, if you disagree, agree, and I love talking DS9. So please hit me up on those instant messaging. Instant messaging? No, that's a 90s kid thing. I'm showing my age. Hit me up on my Instagram DMs. I'm always on there every day, so I love to talk with you guys. But I'm going to bring up some stray observations I got to witness this week. The first is that we still have not seen a lot of Jake. Last week, A Man Alone kind of gave him a subplot a little bit, but it wasn't really that substantial. But I kind of do love his relationship with his father. Again, it's the first parent-child interaction that I think we have in the Trek universe, and It's very warm and positive, and I love to see it, especially as a person with a son. Like, I like it. Sisko's a good dad, and Jake loves him and adores him. So I'll definitely love to see more of him in the future. And another weird observation is that Dax likes to get ogled. So she's walking down the promenade with Kira, and she's like, oh, I forgot what it's like to be a woman. It's been so long, and all the attention I get. And I'm like, is that what it's really like? As a man, we don't ever get ogled, but I'm like, man, I apologize, women. That would suck to always have that attention on you. Yeah, I'm sorry. That would stink. But apparently, I guess it depends on the woman. Dax likes it. So more power to her, man. But I just thought it was funny that we kind of insight into her character a little bit. And again, seeing the more development as we'll get there. Also, speaking of Dax, this is the episode where we see her call Sisko Benjamin more. And that's kind of a defining character trait. And this episode kind of really established that. So it was good. Finally, this was the first writing credit for era Stephen Burr in the series. The famous DS9 writer and head honcho himself. So this was his first writing credit. So there you go. Maybe that's why we saw some of the greatness speaking through on this episode that we know he'll eventually bring to the series. Luna, that's all I have. If you're ready to wrap it up, let's roll. Thank you guys so much for listening. And like I said before, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram. That's kind of where we spend most of our days at today, not really on Twitter or on our Facebook. So feel free to shout out a DM and talk to us about the show, what you liked about Babel, what you didn't like about Babel. Any ideas for the show, we'll be happy to take them down. Interacting with you guys, especially from all over the world. It's been a lot of fun. It's one of the highlights of my days. Again, we're going to have a lot more coming up. We'll definitely get more of a regular schedule in after January. We've had a lot of craziness. Like I mentioned before, my job is like Chief O'Brien. I'm just pulled in a million different directions all the time. That is now slowing down. So be prepared for more OPP content as the year progresses. We do have a lot in store for you. We're thinking of a couple of surprises as the year goes on. We have some good quarterly goals and good annual goals that we want to reach. So be on the lookout for that. And as always, remember, take care of yourselves. Make sure your mental health is on lock. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you're needed and you're wanted. So please hang around and be here. And as always, second star to the right, straight on to